Well, we finally reached the end of Cassian Andor Season 1, and I may be late to the party, but I'm here with a lot of thoughts. So this will be me talking about episodes 10, 11, and 12, but also my thoughts on the first season overall. So let's start with episode 10, that amazing prison break episode. I have to say it was super cool, super gritty, super intense, and it was one of the coolest prison breaks I've ever seen in a show or movie. Really well done. Everything was super interesting. All of the characters worked really well together. The actors were incredible. It was tense the whole time. You never know who's going to live or die or what's going to happen. And especially after all the buildup of previous episodes, it was just really, really interesting and well done. But, of course, with me, that's not the only thing I have to say about it. Because my main problem with the episode is, despite it being an amazing prison break sequence and a really interesting, pretty good episode overall of TV, it is pretty generic feeling. Not much about it screams Star Wars. And I know that a lot of people say that's fine and a lot of people like that, but for me, if I'm watching a Star Wars show, I'm watching a Star Wars show. If Andor wasn't Star Wars, I don't think I would be watching it. So when they have less Star Wars style elements in it, I mostly tune out, lose interest, or at least don't feel connected, even if it is interesting. So for example, we have some pretty generic security guards, pretty generic prison. We have this weird, foot electrocuting floor design, which is interesting and unique and very sci-fi, but doesn't feel very Star Wars to me. It's not something anything like we've seen in any Star Wars ever before. And it's just one of many differences that they've brought in here, which you could say makes everything feel fresh. But at a certain point, if you make everything feel fresh, you're just making a new thing. And calling it Star Wars, having Cassian Andor in it, having some Imperial logos occasionally, that doesn't really make it Star Wars. It's just an interesting prison break episode, and they call it Star Wars. And that relates a lot to my main problem with the entire show, but I'll get to that later. So here's about episode 11. I have to say, for episode 11, I did fall asleep midway through the episode. This is, in my opinion, one of the most boring episodes of the entire show. There's a lot of talking that really goes nowhere, a lot of very small petty character drama that, again, really goes nowhere, doesn't reveal much, we don't learn anything. It's all just conversation that we don't really need to see. And it's not that interesting. And halfway through the episode, when they had some small little TIE fighter chase for 3 minutes, I suddenly just woke up and felt super energized, and I was like, oh, that's right, this is a Star Wars show. Look, there's TIE fighters, and they're chasing in space, and they're having these amazing sound effects and shooting blasters at each other and doing these epic maneuvers with this cool technology, and there's this Star Destroyer thing behind them. And there's rebels, and they're fighting the Empire, and there's a lot of tension and interesting characters, and that scene alone was so Star Wars and so cool. And it was just there for 3 minutes. And then we went back to endless talking and debating and character drama, but not even space opera character drama, and not even interesting dialogue that keeps pushing the plot forward and pushing the characters forward. It's more just characters having small personal conversations about their daily life or about their personal worries, and that can work, but it doesn't work very well in Star Wars, and it doesn't work very well if you don't care about the characters, which is probably another problem I had with the show that maybe not everyone had. If you connected with all the characters in the Andor show, that's great and good for you. Let me know who's your favorite in the comments. But for me, I did not feel much attachment to any of the characters in this show. There's a few that I liked a little more than usual, maybe Bix and Andor and Melshi and Luthen and Mon Mothma and some of the people in the heist team that I don't remember the name of. But other than that, it's just not anything going on. You can basically skip most of this entire episode and still get the feel of the whole show. And that's unfortunately something that's true for most of the show, is you can just cut out a lot of the dialogue, cut out a lot of the really slow, unnecessary panning shots that feel like they're supposed to add atmosphere, but really they just make it feel so slow that I fall asleep. You can cut all these things out of the show and still get the story. I feel again like this is a case of Disney had an interesting idea for a movie, and then they said, well, we want Disney Plus to be successful, so let's force it to be a TV show. And then they just shove in a bunch of filler and very slow shots and credits that last like 30 minutes. And they just make every episode so slow and nothing happens. If you took all the exciting, interesting, plot-pushing parts of the Andor show and you put them in a single movie, I think it might work. It would, of course, need some edits, but it would at least be better than what we got. And this is a similar problem that happened with Kenobi, which is why I tried my best to make a fan edit in a previous video. But even with a fan edit movie version, the fact that they convert their movie idea into a TV show just sucks all the life out of their movie idea and just slows everything down to a crawl and doesn't let anything happen. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, so back to the final episode, episode 12. Episode 12 as the finale just showed me that I had been wrong about Andor, not in the way that probably most of you are hoping. One of my main problems with the first 2 episodes of the show was that the focus is so narrow. It's only on these few people that I'm not very connected to on this one planet, which is not even a classic one. It's a new original planet that's a backwater out in the middle of nowhere. And I get that they're trying to do this kind of slice of life under the Empire vignette. But when you're making an entire series with many episodes that are all an hour long, and you're going to have multiple seasons, and you're trying to get people invested in the world and re-excited about Star Wars, which has been on the decline a lot, this is not a good way to do it, at least for me. And as the show went on, I even made another video saying that I was wrong about Andor and explaining how at first I was worried they were just going to have this narrow focus. And then I realized, oh, actually, that's just the narrow focus for the start. And then they're going to quickly expand it and kind of show how Andor gets involved in this world. But they didn't do that. They started with this very narrow focus. They expanded it out pretty fast. It culminates with the heist episode, which is by far the best episode for every way possible in this entire season, and it's basically the only one I really enjoyed. And then after that, they just kind of compress it back down until the finale is just as slow and small and boring as the first 2 episodes. And that's a real missed opportunity. And then even at the end, they have the audacity to end it with Andor meeting with Luthen and joining the rebellion, basically teasing us like, oh, we didn't show you everything of the rebellion starting in this season, but maybe if you watch season 2, we'll show you some cool stuff. No, Disney, no. I am not going to play that game. I'm not interested anymore. The Andor show has lots of small personal drama and big political speeches and the occasional small action scenes, but it all just feels like so small scale that it doesn't even matter. Consider the other shows, like The Clone Wars, which is a galactic war, A New Hope, where they're blowing up entire planets, blowing up the Death Star, blowing up Alderaan, a huge war, the rebellion's brewing. Rogue One, where there's a team trying to get the plans for the Death Star as the Death Star blows up Jedha, and as they have to blow up the Death Star to get back the plans to protect the rest of the rebellion in the galaxy, while they're dealing with some very intense, very well-written, better than Andor personal drama with Jin's father, and interpersonal drama in the team. And think of the prequel trilogy, where they have the huge battle between the Jedi and the Sith ongoing through every episode, while the galactic war of the Clone Wars rages in the background. Or even episode 5 and 6 with the Rebellion versus Empire, while Luke and Vader are the main focus. There's just so much going on in Star Wars. And Andor is so small and insignificant by comparison. Even when you compare it to a show like Rebels, which is basically the same thing, the Rebels show has so much more going on in it than Andor does. It has way more interesting characters, way more character interaction, way more character personal developments, a faster pace, more going on, more Imperial stuff, more Rebellion stuff, more Jedi, more Sith. It has everything more. So I don't get what the point of Andor is, honestly. I thought that the Rebellion Manifesto speech was pretty good, and it's very fitting to Star Wars, but overall, the show just felt like if you took 1 or 2 episodes of Clone Wars filler or Rebels filler, and then you tried stretching it out into a full-length series. Just, it's nothing happening. And the things that do happen are so small scale that it's just about some random characters no one knows about or cares about, and stuff that barely even affects them most of the time, or things that are so small that they don't even affect the galaxy at all. Most of the show is just watching Mon Mothma stress about financial matters that never even come up by the finale. They're just ongoing to season 2, and her dealing with her husband and daughter, which also never finish, and ongoing to season 2, and Mon Mothma being spied on, and Luthen being spied on, and all of these characters spying on all these characters, which also goes nowhere and just continues on into season 2. The whole finale was nothing resolved. The whole finale was, oh no, Andor's adoptive mom that you met for 5 minutes in a previous episode that didn't do much for the plot and chose to stay behind as a rebel ended up dying as a rebel. And then they have a funeral, and a bunch of people get mad, and they have a riot against the Empire. Basically like the battle we saw at the very beginning of the series when some people start to rise up and have a little battle against the Empire. So nothing really happened here. There's like 10 stormtroopers in the entire show, and none of them even do anything. There's like one shot of Death Troopers, and they just walk around and look scary, I guess. Like, what was even the point of that one Imperial officer guy who starts out as a security guard, and he's annoying from the beginning, super overzealous, not a great actor, frankly, and just kind of messes up and messes up and messes up, and then goes to live with his mom, who's also kind of annoying, and then he eats like very generic cereal that looks like it's from Walgreens instead of Star Wars, and he just hangs out at his mom's house, does a basic office job. He gets uppity and overzealous at his office job and annoying there too. And then he goes back home. He just kind of happens to save his boss, and that's what he did. That's his whole arc. There's not really anything there. A lot of focus on this one random guy eating cereal with his mom for no payoff, which is a huge problem with this show. There's so many setups and almost zero payoffs for anything that they set up. I mean, probably they're going to try in season 2 or something, but oh my gosh, there's nothing happening in the show. The entire show feels like a slow burn that never goes anywhere. And that is such a painful show to watch. For people who love this kind of show with this very intimate level, slow burn, lots of discussions, lots of small character dramas, and the small scale skirmish in the small town in the middle of nowhere kind of a show, if you're into that, maybe it's like a Western somehow, although The Mandalorian did that and is much better at it. So I'm not even sure what genre this is. It's maybe like a really, really slow, basic military thriller spy movie almost, but not really. I don't even know what genre this would be, but if you're the kind of person who loves this show, good for you, but it's not for me. And for the people who love this kind of show, the Star Wars setting is probably just the cherry on top that makes it all the more sweet. But for people not into this kind of show, whatever kind of show this is, the Star Wars connection is just too weak to make this show worth watching at all. So again, if you enjoyed it, great. Feel free to explain why in the comments, because even though I personally don't get it at all, and I've made a lot of videos ripping into the things that I think are bad about it, it's always interesting to hear why other people actually do like it. So go ahead and let me know. But with that said, I just didn't enjoy the show, and Honestly, I personally don't plan to watch season 2, even for YouTube. With Kenobi, The Bad Batch, and other Star Wars shows that I'm not a big fan of, at least I mostly enjoyed the filler and the characters. But for Andor, I just fell asleep multiple times in multiple episodes, and watching through the whole series felt mostly like a chore by the end. It didn't feel fun, it didn't feel exciting, it didn't feel like Star Wars. It felt like, oh yeah, I started a review series of this show. I started watching a lot of it. I guess I might as well finish season 1 and see what happens and hope it gets better, but it never really did. Like I said earlier, the only episode that I really, really liked was the heist episode, and maybe the one leading into it where they plan. But after the heist, it just felt like everything got super boring and small scale again, which is exactly the opposite of where I had hoped it was going. The whole show just felt to me like a very small, slow burn that fizzled out by the heist episode, and after that, there was nothing left that interested me at all. The show has a really great premise, at least in some ways, but the execution was so slow and boring and horribly paced and just had no payoffs that I can't care about it. Especially when I rewatch the old Star Wars movies, Clone Wars, Rebels. Compared to them, this show just feels like nothing. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. It doesn't feel like it's interesting in any way. When I play an old Star Wars video game or board game, watch an old Star Wars show, watch an old Star Wars movie, I'm instantly filled with this like childlike wonder of just how incredible and exciting and adventurous and inspiring and hopeful and fascinating and cool everything is. That's how I felt even watching Rebels and Clone Wars as an adult, watching the prequels as a child, watching the original trilogy anytime. That's just what Star Wars is for me. And to watch an entire Star Wars show, a whole season where every episode is pretty long and pretty intense, and I only felt that feeling for like one episode, that's pretty bad. Watching through most of Andor, I kept thinking maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm just too old or too jaded or not appreciating or just too cynical after watching the other missteps that Disney's made, or maybe I'm burned out from the Kenobi series. Maybe I'm just not as interested in Star Wars anymore as I used to be. Things like that. But when I watched Tales of the Jedi, it was so exciting. It was so fun. It was like jumping out of my seat cheering level fun to watch Ahsoka again and Dooku and Mace Windu and just see that kind of animation and see these Star Wars stories and the Jedi and the Sith. Even though it had its own problems, it was very Star Wars, and it was very fun to watch, and I'll definitely watch it again sometime. But Andor, if I'm watching all the movies, I'll watch episode 1, episode 2, Clone Wars, episode 3, Rebels, etc., all the movies, a bunch of the shows mixed in together. But would I include Andor in that? There is no way. I mean, I might go back and just rewatch the heist episode occasionally because it's really good on its own. But other than that, I don't see much of any value in the whole show, which is pretty bad. But even beyond being bad, for me, it's mostly just kind of confusing because I see online so many people are so passionate about how it's such a good show and it's the savior of Star Wars and it's amazing and it's the best Star Wars show ever. And then I've been watching it and I haven't felt that since the first episode. Like when I watched the original trailers for it, yeah, I felt that too. I made videos on that too. But by the time of the first episode and watching through the whole first season, this is not exciting. There's nothing here. I don't even know what people are getting excited about other than the fact that it's a gritty, more adult version of Star Wars, supposedly. And that alone is not enough to do it for me. I feel like Andor kind of reaches out to the crowd who their favorite movie is Empire Strikes Back, and they really like it because it's the darkest, serious, most gritty Star Wars movie. Maybe people who like Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith, things like that. And those are great movies, but I love them for different reasons than that crowd. So when I watch Star Wars, my favorites are not the ones that are the grittiest and most intense and most adult, because they are the grittiest, most intense, most adult, or even best well written. The kind of Star Wars that I care about and that I value and that I like is the kind of Star Wars that makes me feel excited and adventurous and inspired and has cool characters and funny moments and relatable storylines that inspire me to do better or think of consequences more in my own life, you know? Like the story of Anakin and the story of Luke and Padme and Leia and Obi-Wan and Yoda. These stories are all so interesting and exciting and adventurous and hopeful, and they get dark, but they also have hope, and they're relatable and fascinating and exciting in so many unique ways that Andor just is not. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you are going to very strongly disagree with me or have your own very strong opinions that are different than mine, so go ahead and let me know in the comments, discuss in the comments. I'd love to see the discussions and see what you have to say. Just, be polite about it, of course. And with that said, I'm still looking forward to the rest of the new incoming Star Wars shows and games, even though I'm, of course, a little skeptical and hesitant, but hopefully they're good. And still, I always love all the old Star Wars stuff, and I'll have some new videos coming out eventually about reviewing or revisiting or analyzing the older Star Wars stuff that I know for sure that I'm passionate and excited about. So you have that to look forward to. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Go ahead, like and subscribe if you're interested in more Star Wars analysis, reviews, etc. And with that said, this is Deep Dive, signing off.